friend of the show and a personal friend on here, author, metaphysician, esotericist, and all around great guy, Chris Allaun. And many of you already know Chris. You know his work. He's been on here to talk about Underworld and Otherworld, all of his books. But what I'd like to do is have Chris tell you, because I get to break all the rules since it's the last show. What are they going to do? Cancel me? um, so, Chris, tell us a little bit about your background. About your community there in Chicago, and the work that you do.
Well, my background, I've been practicing witch and pagan for over 30 years. Um, I am an ordained minister with the Fellowship of the Phoenix here in Chicago. Recently, I went back to school and got my master's in divinity, and so I am a clinical chaplain at a major hospital here, and so I'm also working on my doctorate in ministry because I like pain, apparently. Um, and so, I have a small personal circle. I also have Fellowship of the Phoenix. I got my chaplaincy. I'm writing. Um,
What
I
a
think
slacker!
I think that's enough for one. I think
And now you're
it's
going
a
to start
lot.
doctoral studies.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they call that a masochist.
Masochist. Oh my God. Um, uh,
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm glad I'm doing it because the program I'm in is the intersection between spiritual care and psychology.
Oh,
So when someone is having like grief or trauma, or a history of substance abuse or abuse in general, we learn how to navigate that through like a spiritual lens. So I'm very glad I'm in the course. It's just I haven't stopped schools in what, 6 years.
I can relate. So you've just come out with a new book, and that's going to be our topic tonight. And I
Mhm.
just want to say, up front, people know that when I do these podcasts, the guests that I invite, I never invite somebody whose book I didn't like. And believe it or not, there
I
are
hope
books.
not.
Believe it or not, there are books that I've read, and I've said, I'll be happy to write a couple words about it on Amazon and places like
Yeah,
that. But like, I don't know that we could have a conversation. And it's not because they're bad books. It's just because the book didn't land with me, or it
right.
wasn't
Yeah.
resonating with where I'm at. But this was an amazing book. The book is called, despite what the thumbnail says, it's called Whispers from the Coven.
Mhm.
And it's really incredible, a unique approach. And there you go. I still, this is a new platform, as I told people on our last episode on Sunday. I still haven't figured out how to do overlays and all of that other stuff, and so I guess I'm not going to learn that at the moment. But the book is really unique because it represents an intersection between what I think of as a sort of noir fiction and a
Mhm.
grimoire.
Right.
And
Right. Right. That's exactly right.
in the introduction, you mentioned that you're taking a risk by teaching magic through storytelling rather than writing another how-to manual or another
Mhm.
grimoire or another typical esoteric or witchcraft book. And you've chosen to create this story, though, in a very specific, very niche atmosphere in Chicago in the
Yeah.
40s, post-war, and with that delicious noir aesthetic. Like, I think your book needs to be made into a movie. So
Oh,
my
yeah.
my question for you is, how does the 1945 1947 Chicago setting enhance the book for the type of magic that you're teaching? And is there something about that shadowy sort
Mm.
of post-war era that makes it the perfect backdrop for the lessons on spiritual work and facing darkness that you share in this story. Trying not to give any spoilers.
I mean, we could give a little taste. So the book, as you said, it's a fiction. It's about a coven of nine witches in 1947 Chicago who have ghostly vampire witch adventures and spells and battles and things, and it's written like a journal because, and I got that idea. Well, let me start over for a second, just so I can give people some context. So people wanted a sequel to the Black Book of Jonathan, not Bristle, and I didn't want to. I love the book. Love Jonathan, and that's a possibility. But I don't know. I didn't want to repeat myself. I want to do something interesting. But people are like, yeah, I want a story. I want a story. I'm like, okay. So in Chicago, if you've ever really done research about Chicago history and who we are and what we're famous for the mafia. If you watch any mafia movie, odds are it's either New York or Chicago, one or the other. And Chicago, I know people talk about like haunted Salem or haunted New Orleans, and those are great places. But Chicago is considered one of the most haunted cities in the world, and part of it is, you know, um, around the World's Fair and one of the pieces of history, they decided to make the first cross country train through Chicago, and it was considered like the halfway point of America. It isn't, however, they would say that. Because let me tell you, flying to Manhattan is a lot shorter than flying to LA. Let me tell you. Um, but anyway, and so there was a lot of immigrants, a lot of transients, a lot of people who were leaving, the countryside, the farms to go into the city, and every single thing in the book, the ghost stories actually are true. They're all real. Not only did I do the research, but I went to all these places, and I have a few fun stories about that too. Um, so they're all real places, and you know, part of the reason I chose 1947, I did it for two reasons. The first reason is I didn't want a 1930s mafia story, even though that certainly is in there. I also didn't want. I wanted to capture a little after the whole mafia thing, and partly it's because whenever there's an exciting piece of history, what happens directly after those events? Nothing. And I wanted that in between quiet between like the 40s and 60s, the 40s and 50s. And the other thing, and it's like a personal thing, is that I truly believe I have a, uh, a past life in the 40s in Chicago, because every time I'm in certain places, I time travel astrally, and it isn't like, oh, I'm gonna imagine or visualize 1947. I'm actually pulled out of my physical body, and I'm there, and I can tell you what house I was at, where I worked. I can tell you who I was with, the people I associated with. It was so vivid. So I chose the exact date for 1947, um, because of all those reasons. And at first, when I first started to write it, I thought I was going to do like, oh, let me talk about my magical past life. And then my helper spirits are like, no, that's not the story. Mm, Write it in this way. Each chapter is a point of view of a different witch and their adventure. And I kind of did that because in one of the circles I was at in my 20s, we would every time we did a ritual or a major spell, we would take turns writing it down. And I kind of uh, borrowed from that idea of, oh, I'm leading this ritual or I'm doing a seance or an invocation or whatever. So I'll write it in our journal. And so I was like, oh, actually, that's a different approach because in the Black Book of Jonathan, it was just Jonathan's story in first person. And so I had to decide, how do I do 9 different people this time? And so I was like, oh, a journal. So that's why I chose the style and the time frame. And the other thing I liked is I kind of like the idea of the old school secret witches. We can't tell people who we are. I kind of thought that was fun. Um, yeah, so that's my reasoning for all the setup and stuff.
That's that's pretty fascinating, and I love the idea, having come from a different kind of tradition in folk magic and Afro-Sicilian esotericism. I wasn't I'd never considered that in covens something like that could exist. So I thought maybe you just dreamed up as a creative that idea, but I love that idea of whoever leading the ritual writes in
Mhm.
the coven's journal their account of what you did and what happened in that ceremony or ritual. That's awesome. There's just so much, and I definitely can see you in the in the 40s in Chicago. Like
Uh-huh.
your publicity photos over the last 7-8 years.
Uh-huh.
When you see them, it looks like you're actually looking at a time traveler. So I love that piece too. I want to dive into. We could just stay right there, and I could talk about that the entire time. But I will say right up front, as long as I'm going to ask you first before I make that announcement. Um, this is usually supposed to be a 30-minute podcast. Are you available if we go a little over?
I sure am.
Okay, I'm not going to define what a little means, but you've been on the show before. You know what it means.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the tragedy of Margaret Foyle and the concept of magical ethics that you covered. One of the most I think incredible and kind of almost jarring arcs in the book is her story. And we
Mhm.
see usually we see coven members sticking together and all of the secrecy, as you said, around
Mhm.
their community. But in Margaret's story, she falls prey to the vampire of Rose Hill.
The Vampire of Rose Hill. So for
Okay.
Rose Hill, that's a true story.
It's a
Rose
true
Hill.
story. Wow.
Well,
And then she comes possessed and she commits terrible acts. So that was a really bold choice, I thought, and very realistic, because we know that that's what happens in the real world. And
that's right.
what magical lessons were you hoping to impart from Margaret's story, and her descent into vampirism and the consequences of her love spell and all of that?
Gosh, that's a good question. So the Vampire of Rose Hill is a real thing. It's interesting because Chicago in the 1800s was basically just downtown, and then over the years it kind of grew up north. So Rose Hill, it's interesting. I love this. So the graves used to be in Lincoln Park area. And so what they did is, and this is also a part of the story. Remember in Poltergeist, the movie, how they moved the stones but didn't move the bodies? Guess what? They got that from Chicago because they moved the gravestones but didn't move the bodies. And so this park is super haunted. And so they moved this graveyard to Rose Hill, moved. And so and it was outside of the city limits. One now, of course, is a part of the city. And it's cool because, Chicago, a lot of people think Chicago famous haunted cemetery. Graceland is all the rich people are. And it's cool. Like that is a great cemetery. Rose Hill, when you walk in, feels like witchcraft. Like when you walk in, no matter what time of year, the leaves are falling. No, it could be summer. The leaves are falling, and there's like stags in there that walk around and live. And this cemetery is probably a mile each way. It's huge. It's big. Like if you're standing on one side, you can't see the other. It's ginormous. And so there's a grave that this an actual old world vampire hunter dug up because what had happened was a lot of them had tuberculosis, lung fever, and and in the 1800s, and that they didn't have embalming fluid like we do now. And so sometimes with these diseases, your lungs would just bleed out, and it would bleed out through the mouth and the nose. And so what they would do is they would open them at the graveside, and if they had bloody lungs, that was a vampire. So they actually paid a famous vampire hunter from Europe to come to Chicago to kill the vampires. Isn't that the craziest thing?
It
And I
is.
was so struck by this story. And I have a friend who spiritually he's a pretty powerful magician, but he resonates with the vampire. He calls himself a vampire and that magical lore. And so, when I found that story, I'm like, you know what? That's kind of cool. I'm going to have the vampire because lot of us grew up strangely attracted to the vampire idea. And for me, it's because I respect the vampire community. But for me, the attraction wasn't so much I want to be a vampire. It was my first introduction to dark magic, that nighttime shape shifting type of magic. So I added that story because it also, a lot of the stories are about, ghosts and things. I was like, well, let's kind of give some Chicago history and lore, but actual vampire lore, like witch lore of vampires and how that relates. And plus, it also gives the characters, it gives the coven like some challenges and different dynamics versus we're gonna save the day. No, you're not this time.
Yeah, I love that. And that was, I think, probably for me. Um, Similarly, I grew up with a fascination with vampires, as did my mom. And she would keep me home every afternoon at 4 o'clock. Dark Shadow. You're like way too
Dark
young to even
Shadows,
know this, but
yeah.
Dark Shadows was on. And so if there was like a really important episode that was coming out, my mom would let me stay home, and she would tell my dad I was sick, and so I'd play all day, and then at 4 o'clock. I wasn't like running home from walking, from where the
Yeah.
bus stop was, and I'd watch the show with her. And as I grew up, more of the vampire lore and Anne Rice and all of that,
Mhm.
just I just devoured that stuff. And I always found the an attraction to shadow work and to the dark
Mhm.
side, and I didn't see vampires as being scary. I didn't see vampires as being the bad guy, and originally considered writing a novel, that I'll tell you about another time, when we're not on the air. But it was a queer novel about a vampire, that it's a story that before I see my last sunset, it's going to have to be told.
Mm.
because it's and so I read your book, and that's the first thing I was like, wow, this is like awesome. Because here in Pennsylvania, we have similar lore, and you
Mhm.
will find um, the wealthy created these graves that have metal grates over them, like wrought iron, beautiful work, but like wrought iron, what do you call it, like crisscross um, grave metal work. And it
Mhm.
was it was designed so that, one, it would keep the vampires out, and two, if they were a suspected vampire, they would put another cage around that, and the vampires couldn't get free. Um, and so it
I
was,
love it.
I grew up with that lore and loved it. And we'd go past cemeteries, and of course, kids would embellish those stories and scare the younger ones or the gullible ones with making up stories. You know, we had no idea what the actual lore was back then. I only found that out as I became an adult. But as kids, the stories that we would make up about these graves and the vampire that was there and all the people that they killed and blah blah blah. And that's why there's so many in the cemetery, because they were afraid the whole town was going to be overtaken. So I was like, yeah, this is the kind of witch story I want. I love the originals, and I have to say that as brilliant as I thought the writing was in that show, I think this, I really mean it, would make a fantastic show. So you
I
gotta, I'm
appreciate
just gonna
that.
put that out there. We got a comment before I let's see. There we go. A comment before I go on. And Steve Marcellus says, I love Dark Shadows. You mentioned Chicago being haunted. Have you ever experienced something at a particular location? For
Mhm.
example, let me put that back up. Resurrection Mary, or maybe Our Lady of Angels school site.
Yeah, so Resurrection Mary, that's at a close cemetery. We're not in the city of Chicago. It's outside. It's not in the city. So I actually was considering using that story, but I was like, I want something in the city limits. And the Our Lady of Angels, I believe that's the story about the orphans who all there was a fire and they all died. And what had happened was, I believe it's in the 40s. That's the reason I didn't add that in the book, is because I think that took place after my story was being told, so I didn't add it. Um, so have I experienced things? Of course. I mean, I'm a witch. I see them all the time. In fact, I um right now, because I'm in my doctorate program, I don't tra travel a lot to different sites anymore, at least until my doctorate is over. But in my circle, I we call the witch ancestors. We work with the dead. I work a lot with ancestors. I wrote a book about how to help uh, spirits cross over to the afterlife, and so my spirits, I have an understanding. If they need me to help a spirit cross over or to heal, bring them by. I'll help. I'm always happy to help. That's part of my spiritual agreement that I have with the spirits, with my ancestors, with my gods, things like that. Um, Chicago has spirits and ghosts everywhere. I mean, you have to remember it's an old city. There's also, used to be lots of mafia, so lots of crime. Uh, one, Indian, or I shouldn't say Indian, indigenous um, people were killed and things, and so you have that energy. And so there's a lot here, and there's a few ley lines in Chicago that just attract spirits left and right. The lake, one of the things that people may not know is anytime you have a body of water. It's a conduit for the dead, for spirits, the underworld. And so we have Lake Michigan. We have Lake Michigan, which, if you think about it, is a very large scrying mirror and portal, because sometimes the lake is glass flat and it really looks like glass, and you can see the stars reflect on it. That's a scrying mirror. It's a it's a portal to the spirit world. So yeah, and I actually live on the lake at Samhain from like October 21st through November 15th, 16th, which we just had. It's just like crowded with spirits. It's almost like, hey guys, I need to get home, get out of the way. So they're all over the place.
And I have to tell our viewers we did not discuss this prior. So that perfect layup for my next question is just one of those things that happens.
That's funny.
You, as you said, you weave a lot of dark Chicago history into the
Mhm,
narrative, like the Iroquois theater fire, the lipstick killer, which I
mhm,
loved. And one of my favorite things that you discuss involving the way that the Shadow Man was let in was how the reversal of the Chicago River created a crack in our dimension. So my question, because I just thought that was brilliant writing and fascinating reading, um, when writing about real tragedies
mhm.
where hundreds of people died. What did you do, or how did you? I suspect I know the answer to this, and that's why I want you to tell about it. How did you balance the historical respect
Right.
with creative license and turn that into a magical plot between Ira Couch and the Shadow Man, for example,
Mhm.
when writing the book?
So, everything I've wrote is basically from the lore, from people telling their stories. Um, a, a little of sightings, but the thing about sightings, you have to be careful, because if they're magical people, and does it come from a place of the sight, or does it come from a place of fear? Or does it come from a place of, oh, I want to see something, and so I make myself see something? So I hope I did a good job about respecting those spirits and things like that, especially the innocent spirits. There's a lot of not so innocent spirits. Those people, I'm going to tell the truth. Like, here's what happened. You know, um, the thing about Ira uh, Couch is there's so many rumors and so much like urban legends and stories and things. Because so for the audience who doesn't know about Ira Couch, so in Lincoln Park, right before you hit the downtown area, the actual park itself, and it's huge, used to be the cemetery, like I said, and they moved all the stones, except they didn't move one mausoleum. And there's a teeny tiny gate that we just hop over, like it's the size of your knees. It's so silly. It's ornamental, I guess, and it's locked. The interesting thing is two things. Why is that the only mausoleum, and it's small? It's the size of like your bedroom, or even half your bedroom, your bathroom, even. It's real small. Why was that the only one not moved? And here's the other mystery: the family doesn't have the key. Nobody knows what happened to the key. So they could smash it open if they wanted to, but out of respect. And plus, it's a piece of our history in Chicago. We think it's cool. It sounds, I mean, to a lot of, I guess, normal people who don't do magic, like, why is there a mausoleum in the park? Because we think it's awesome. um, but there's a lot of like urban legends that some say that Mr. Couch is not in there. Some say he is. Some say there's something nefarious. Some say it's a magical gateway to some spiritual realm. Some people say people got lazy, and that's why they didn't move it. So I was just like, you know what? Well, let's tell a story. And when I went and spoke to the spirits, and yes, every single spirit in that uh, story in the book I spoke to, um, and I said, "Hey, I want to do this," and Mr. Couch was like, "I don't care," because I feel like he's so used to people. It's like a tourist attraction. He's so used to people. He's fine. Like he didn't feel like, oh, don't make me this or don't make me look like this. Like he just that was an interesting thing to do. Um, I find that a lot of old spirits, like over 100 or 200 years old, they they get a kick out of things like that sometimes. And I also got the impression that's just his humor. Like he thinks it's interesting and funny, so he was fine with it. So yeah, so that's how that came about. I try to make sure I respect. I'm going to tell their story. You know, I didn't have any spirits say, "Oh, please don't repeat this. I know it was in the news or whatever. Uh, please don't talk about." I didn't have that at all, at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I should
yeah.
just throw my questions away because you keep jumping to the next
I
question and
I tend to
answering it.
do that.
This is really easy. I could just let you just talk. You know, and I was going to ask that about you know, about that, and what I was thinking of was in the forward, Devin Hunter
Mhm.
writes that the reader is actively engaging in magic that's already in progress when they read the story, and you write that storytelling itself is a
Uh-huh.
spell, and
The
so
spell.
I wondered whether you know you know, whether you consulted with and worked with, collaborated with spirits that you talk about in the book, and wonder if since you just since you just answered that question, let's see if you could do the next one. um, what talk about the mechanics of this concept, like how do you envision the reader participating in the coven's ritual, or do you um as they read the narrative, or are you do they need to physically perform the rituals like a spell to receive the benefit, or is there sort of a jump out of the time and space continuum construct
Look
into
at
that
you
liminal space?
out of the hands magic there. So here's the thing. I think it depends upon your skill level. If you are a beginner to intermediate, I think you should perform the spell. One of the things that one of my teachers taught me years ago is always learn the magic in the physical realm first, become a master at it. Once you become a pro master and you understand what's happening, then you can do it in the astral. And the reason is that sometimes if we just close our eyes, envision, or we astral project, our visualization, especially as a beginner, isn't all that great. You know, I can visualize great, however, it's not perfect. There's flaws, and that's normal because you know how even if you close your eyes and think of a tree, it'll be a tree, it'll be an orange, it'll be a tree, and it's black, and it's a tree, and it's not there, and then you forgot what you're doing in the first place. Oh yeah, tree. And that's normal. That's okay. You're still seeing it. However, it's not perfect. And so, if you do the magic first in the physical, later on when you become a master at it, then you can do it in the astral. So, for us, for you and I, and other advanced practitioners, of course, you can just. I can't tell you how many times I have read a spell and it happened because I need it. Oh, here's a cool story. Like, and this is how I know the spells because I created every single spell in the book. It was all me. I was writing the truth spell. The truth spells in the book. I was typing it out. After I typed it, I get a phone call. I shit you not. I swear on all of my gods. I get a fucking phone call. I'm typing, oh, I wrote the spell, all done. Ring. I have to tell you the truth about something.
That's so awesome.
And I was like, damn, that's even good for me. Fuck. Holy shit. Normally I've had like, you know how you like, I'm gonna cast a spell for a new job and you get the ingredients and like you need this fucking job, like fuck, I'm broke as fuck. I need this job. And you get the candles and you get the herbs, you get the stuff, and you set it up, and right before you light the candle to the job you applied for, they say, "Hey, you got the job after all. Congrats." And you're like, "Damn." And that's because you needed it so bad. And because I believe the difference between a successful spell and an unsuccessful spell is how bad you want the damn thing.
Yeah.
Because if you want it like life or death and fuck you all because I'm getting this, it happens, hands down. If you're like, if I do good, when someone tells me, if it happens, it happens, it's not going to happen. Make it happen. Like you have to want it. Like every celebrity I've ever seen that was successful, it's the same thing. I wanted it so bad I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
Like I wanted it so bad. I I didn't dream of it as an obsession. I dreamed of it because it was my joy. It was my
Yeah.
everything. And
Neville
there's a
Goddard says when you do a working, you have to do the working as though it's a thing already accomplished because
that's
it is.
right. And it has to be true for you. It has to be true. Like you can't do this whole. One of my teachers said you have to temporarily. Um, oh my God, how did he say it?
Suspend disbelief.
Suspend disbelief. That's it. Suspend disbelief. You have to. Even some advanced magic, you're like, shit, I don't know if it's gonna work. It's gonna work. Just throw it out. Like one of the things when I teach my students how to scry and how to do like advanced divination and like conjuring spirits and seeing spirits, I'm like, okay, stop. It's happening. It's happening. And then of course I like to say when people are like, well, sometimes I'm making it up. I'm like, oh, you are. I'm confused. What do you mean? I'm like, your imagination becomes a vehicle to clothe or to house spiritual energy. Like if you conjure Hecate, when I see her and I visualize her, that becomes a container for her energy to communicate with me. Otherwise, it's flashes of light and the energy and zigzags and spirals, and it makes no sense.
Right.
Our imagination makes it make sense. So suspend belief and make it happen. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, my
One
true
of
spell happened like immediately.
an author that I met at a conference was taught this concept that I've since integrated into a lot of my classes, where she calls it the one command. And the one command essentially is what you just said. You just, instead of waiting for your subconscious to start sowing seeds of doubt, when you do a
Oh,
working, you say, I don't know how let's say you wanted this great job. I don't know
mhm,
how I have the present tense. I don't know how I have the perfect job that pays me blah 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 blah, that satisfies me in every way. All I know is I do, and I'm so grateful. And
mm,
you do this over a course of as long as it takes, and then you do it right before you go to sleep. So as you go to sleep, you've just planted seeds that your
right,
deeper subconscious, your magical subconscious, can take you, and you instead of, like, your subconscious mind, your conscious mind can't argue with that, because you didn't say I have the perfect job. You say I don't know how have the perfect job. And so now it's like, oh, how do I argue with that? He just said he doesn't know how. And so that it suspends all of that, suspends the disbelief, and it takes you straight to the, what does this feel like? What does it look like?
Mm.
And everything is then when you go to sleep, the dreams are all in the present tense. It's the perfect job. It's the people that you're interacting with. So I love that. Oh God, I'm just going so far over. I'm so sorry, but
No,
I
this is
just have a
great. I'm
I have a
fine. I'm completely fine.
I can't stop halfway through the book. So, um, the another this was this was the one topic I wanted to start with it, but it would have made no sense. But let's talk about the devil as the witch father. The catalyst for the book's events, without giving too much away, is the coven performing a ritual to call the devil to increase their power, and you portray the devil not as a figure of evil, but as the teacher who works in his own ways and helps the coven to the coven to evolve through
Mhm,
struggle. So for listeners who might come from a background where where they're familiar with the construct of the Christian devil, where the devil is an antagonist, can you explain your view of the devil as witch father and why he was necessary to initiate the coven's battle against darkness?
uh-huh. Right. So, okay. So in traditional witchcraft and folklore witchcraft, Appalachia, anything that's, I want to say like rural, sometimes urban, for community-based, land-based, the idea of, the horned one, the dark primal uh, deity of initiation of challenge, and some people say a trickster, which I've grown to hate that word because it just has horrible connotations. Um, the Redeemer, the Lucifer, the betrayer of God, which I'm all about that. Let's betray, you know, God, but not in I
Especially
want to
the
hurt
demiurge.
people. Exactly. Not in a I want to hurt people way, but you have absolute power. Why? Why? I want to question that. The questioner, even. So, and so, of course, all those things to the Christian church is a heresy, right? And so the church would say, okay, with that spirit at the crossroads, or that spirit in the woods, or whatever, in the cauldron, or on the stang, or whatever, that's not a deity. That's Satan. That's the devil. And so the witches and the conjure people, the conjure men and women are like, okay, well, the priest says is the devil. He still gives me magical powers so I can survive and eat and make a living and conjure food and make food grow and conjure animals to eat and rains to, you know, uh, water the crops. Fuck it, come devil come, and so my first traditional craft initiator, because I asked him that question, like, why do they call him the devil? Because as we know in Wicca, they say there is no devil in the craft, and he said, well, the priest said your deity is the devil, so okay, fine, it's the devil. The other thing now, it's kind of a fuck you towards Christianity, like, you know what? I don't follow your rules. So if you think I worship the devil, then fine. I'm standing in my power. I don't need you to tell me what I cannot. It's a sort of a rebellion against the patriarchy, you know, against the against the oppressors. Because as far as I'm concerned, all those people who are telling women, gay men, uh, healers, magicians, shamans to stop and to be oppressed, you're the oppressor. I have no loyalty to you. You are the oppressor because it's about your power and not ours, right? So it's kind of a rebellion against that, just to say the devil. And one of the things that I try to teach, and my students and my circle members is I want you to reflect and meditate and journey and spirit journey with the idea of the devil and face your shit, face your fears, and kind of unlearn, unravel, unhook. Unhook is actually a good thing. The Christian church has hooks in us. Do this, don't do that, sin, da da da. And if we take out that hook and say, how do I really see the Horned One, Old Scratch, the God? Because a lot of witches that I know don't see even the Horned One figure as the powerful, opposite of God. It's just a local deity who hangs out in the trees, gives you magic. It's not that big of a deal. Calm down. Whereas for me, in my practice, I do see him as a powerful deity. I don't see him as having equal power to the source of all things. Using Kabbalistic terms, the Cater, the Ensofer. I don't see that. But for me, he's the initiator. He like in Hindu, true Hindu Tantra, which isn't about sex magic. It's about facing your shit, facing your fears, facing your darkness. It's about walking the crooked path. About, hey, society teaches us certain things to oppress us. Let's unlearn those things and challenge ourselves so that we can learn to rebel against oppression and stand in our own power. That's what the devil does. And to me, the devil, and I say this with pride, is Diana, Lucifer, Kalima, the devil. I know a whole lot of people who still have that Christian baggage. I'm like, you call Diana, and Diana is my goddess. She's on my altar behind me. She is my it girl. So when I say that for her, it's a compliment, you know. So it's it's all the deities who teach you how to stand in your own power. And here's the cool thing about that: how do you stand in your own power when you're not the strongest? You're not white. You're not male. You have a disease or cancer, or you have you're differently abled. You're in a wheelchair. Um, you have trauma. You come from trauma. You're trying to heal, and you're struggling. What does standing in your power look like when you have these things against you? I think all those things actually teach us and empower us. However, it's a process, and it isn't like, I had trauma, so therefore I'm enlightened. It's not that. It's you learn from this trauma, you do the best you can. And when people do the best they can, that's magic, man.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
absolutely. So I have two. Well, I have a comment, and then we have two comments to share from Steve too that I don't want to miss. One of which I was going to save till the end, but we're almost at the end. But yeah, I think
No, I don't want it to end.
no
I don't want
one
it to end.
can no one can read the story, the mythology of the quote unquote garden, and read it from, like, put yourself outside the story and critically read it, and not see the quote unquote serpent as the good guy. Because the serpent says, why, you got to ask yourself, why is this demiurge telling you that you can't eat from that tree? Maybe because they don't want you to know something. Let's find out what that is. And so for me, as a an esoteric Catholic bishop,
About to say,
who
you're
is
a Gnostic, aren't you?
constantly in trouble with the mainstream church for teaching that, for saying that Lucifer and Christ are two sides of the same coin. That's in fact in their scripture. If they ever read their scripture in Latin or in Greek, they would find that Lucifer is the name that they give to Rabbi Jesus, because he's the light bearer. And he's the light bearer. Why? Because he stood in the face of the patriarchy and said, your
He
rules
did.
are bullshit. Your
He did.
traditions are bullshit.
Yeah.
They're unnecessary. So I loved that, and I really appreciated it. And I was hoping you would go in that direction. Now, Steve asks us, says, not to ask too many questions, but out of your book, what is a good place to start? Everything
Oh,
I want,
yes.
I have to believe in first. It never happens till I put my energy toward it. And then he comments, or they comment that the church whines about being persecuted, but they're the ones doing the persecution. Here, here. But what book would you recommend that people start with?
Oh God. So it depends upon what you want to do and what your joy is, because if you want some like good old fashioned traditional witchcraft down home, take a spaghetti pot and an old broom and do witchcraft, and I would say start with the Black Book of Jonathan the Copper. So if you're into the ancestors and the underworld, you want the underworld and deeper into the underworld. And I want to do a teeny tiny plug for that. So originally, Underworld and Deeper into the Underworld was supposed to be one book. And Mandrake in 2015 was like, Chris, this is 500 pages. You got to separate them. A few years ago, he said, they're selling really well. Let's put them together as they were meant to be. And the hardcover double edition of Underworld and Deeper Underworld is actually cheaper as a hardcover than buying the two soft covers separately. So just saying, I'm saying you can just get the hardcover
That was going to
because
be my recommendation. So
and
one
plus I love a good hardcover.
one
If you are, I was
go
just
ahead.
we're gonna say if you're into fairies and dragons, then start with Otherworld. If you're into like the gods and angelic forces and stars and planets, then start with Upperworld. You know,
Yeah, I'm
so
and
it depends
and
on your thing.
I can't agree more with that recommendation. I have one final place to go, and you'll obviously, when you answer, you'll probably answer some of the questions that I said, okay, this is too long, I have to cut
Probably.
it. So I'm thrilled. You talk in your about in your previous book, in the Black Book of Jonathan Not Bristle, um, the um, the folk magic practices of witchcraft in Texas. In
Mhm.
Whispers, Patricia Glasspool explicitly um, mentions that she was trained by Not Bristle before coming to Chicago. So, how do
Yeah.
you see? First, I was really curious about whether that's a historical thing or whether that's a creative license thing in the
Uh,
story. And how do you see magic evolving from the rural folk traditions of Not Bristle to high stakes urban, more structured coven work in Lincoln Park in Chicago? And is this a
yeah.
reflection of your own evolution as an occultist, or like I said, is it based on a real story
Um,
of Patricia?
so okay, so Jonathan Copper was channeled. I channeled it. And some people say, "Did you really channel it, or was it just like a dream or visualization?" Yes, it was all those things. Um, of Whispers was not channeled. It was a historical magical fiction with spells. However, the reason I did the whole Jonathan Not Bristle Easter egg was because goddamn people kept breathing down my neck about a Jonathan Not Bristle too, so I had to add it. And it's funny because um, I am planning to maybe do a sequel to Jonathan. However, it's not me being me. I don't like to keep doing the same shit over and over again. It would be something completely different. Completely. Um, I'm trying to think. What was the other part of the question? Oh, about the magic evolution. So, one of the things I tried to do with both Jonathan and Whispers was authenticity for the type of magic that was being practiced at the time. So you know, you're in rural Texas or rural Alabama or or wherever, like for those of us who grew up in the South, like I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and even then, 80s and 90s, it is rustic. Like I had neighbors who had no power. I had some neighbors who literally in 1992 had an outhouse. I had you know, farms and chickens and the whole thing. And like growing up in Houston, well, in rural outside, way outside of Houston, I had no air conditioning growing up. I didn't have air conditioning for the first time till I was 18 years old in my own apartment. And that's just something we got used to. It was still, I mean, hot is hot. I don't care what you say. And if you ever been to Houston and in August at night, it's 85 degrees with 90% humidity. It's awful. And so that type of magic is going to be rustic. That type of magic is very tradcraft. It's take go into the woods. You take a stick and you call the wind, or or your cow dies. You take the bones and you conjure with those bones because that's what you have. Whereas in 1947, you know, that was when Crowley first started to become well, people knew him when he actually published his works, but they weren't big sellers. They weren't. I mean, he didn't. He was notorious in his lifetime, but he wasn't popular like we know him now until way later. And it wasn't until like if you read any books from like I don't know, I'm gonna say like the 1880s until until the 50s when Gardner came out. Before Gardner, everything was ceremonial, spiritualist. It wasn't, I wouldn't say witchcraft at all, but you know how people call everything witchcraft? Um, if you didn't see it here, eye roll. Not everything is witchcraft. It can be magic and not witchcraft. Oh my God. But anyway, so I tried to kind of stay with the magic that they would have practiced with the resources that they had at the time. You know, they
Excellent.
would have had Crowley, they would have had triangles and candles and ceremonial magic. Oh, the other thing, I don't know if you know this, the occult bookshop here in Chicago was established roughly 1917. So there were a, a, like one occult store in like 1947, and it's very famous. Um, it has passed hands like 6 times since then. Um, but that's the magic that you would have. And if you're a magical historian, get yourself a copy of books from the 1800s to 1949 or 1950. And it's mostly how to become psychic, how to light a candle and wish for luck, or it'll be how to meditate with Jupiter. It's ceremonial light, you know, which I find fascinating because I remember as a kid finding these old books at flea markets and thinking this was the coolest thing. I didn't know what to do with them when I was like 6, but I was like, oh, this is cool. So that's why the magic is the way it is. And, you know, I want it to be authentic to the time. One of the things that, and I just have to say this because, you know, um, on my Amazon, one of my detractors said, "I I should have known he hated the book. I should have known Whispers was awful because of the cartoony cover." Well, the cover, recognize anything? This is what 1947 postcards would have looked like. So how I designed the cover is I took some postcards from 1947 and I told the designer, can you make a cover that looks like this, and that's where I got the cover.
That's awesome. I have to say, you did it again, because I was going to.
I'm
I already,
psychic.
I had plans from the start that I was going to end this by imploring you, as somebody who's eating up it. Welcome to Dairy. Um,
I haven't
I
seen that yet.
Oh, definitely watch it. If you're a Stephen King
Okay,
fan,
I
it's
am.
definitely,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a slow burn. And I
All right.
bitch every week. They're only on episode 4, but I bitch every week about how slow it is. To a close friend of mine, but at the end of the episode, then I text him back and say, okay, it was worth it. Because he's like, just shut up and watch and continue to watch. You're going to enjoy it. And what I love about that that series is that, and about Stephen King in general, is that he has created
Hmm.
his own universe around the Dark
Right.
Tower. And so there are threads that connect all of these different aspects, different worlds, different times, and different people. And as I was reading your book, especially when we got to the connections between Jonathan Notbristle
Hmm.
and Patricia, and I was like, this is the beginning of the next Stephen King. Like right sitting right here on the show, guys. This is the next Stephen King. I'm putting it
Oh
out
well,
there in the
shit.
universe,
You have to
and
write sequels.
there's your solution. You don't, because you don't have to write sequels. Because he didn't write that many sequels to
No, he
his stuff,
didn't. I think
but
he only had like 2 or 3.
they all connect, and I think that'll give your readers more of what they want, because this book was a fantastic read. I'm not somebody who generally likes to read fiction anymore. I just, it's like not high on my list of things to do, because of my schedule and everything else.
Mhm.
I could not put this down. I so enjoyed it. So I want to first of all thank you on behalf of everybody that reads it, because I don't see how, like, screw that asshole who criticized the book. They probably didn't
Who didn't
even
like
read
the
the book.
book?
They probably didn't even read the book. Um, but I just want to thank you. I couldn't think of a better guest to be on our last episode. And I want to tell all of our viewers over the last 7 years, thank you so much for your support and for your participation, and being part of this vision that we had for this chapter. And I promise you'll hear from me again. This isn't the last. I'll be stirring up shit. Just give me a little bit of space, and that'll
Yes.
happen.
Wait till in the future, because 12, we have projects happening, don't we?
Yes, we do. And we'll have, there is another project that's coming up on, as far as podcasts go, and we'll definitely, wink wink nod nod, this isn't the last you're going to see me and Chris on this screen at the same time either. But I love you. I
Oh, I love
appreciate
you
you.
too.
Give my love to Dan,
I
and
will.
thank you so much for being on the show, everybody. Thanks for indulging me for a full hour. And
The
Chris, thank
extended
you
edition.
thank you for making this hour just amazing. It's everything I hoped it would be.
Oh,
And
you're so
so
sweet.
thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris. And good night. We'll talk to everyone soon.